Today we're going to build a desktop application with Python. We're going to be using the guizero library. Guizero is designed to be beginner friendly, and this is very much an introductory lesson. But with that said, hopefully it gives you enough experience and enough exposure to the library that you can go off and make your own applications. We're going to be building an Autoclicker with this today. So the first thing that we need to do is install the guizero library. So we're going to switch over to VS Code. And we need to open up a terminal with Control backtick. And we're just going to say pip install guizero. And that's going to go get the library and download it. And we're ready to go. So the next thing we want to do is get a basic application going. So we're going to make this simple application that you see over here and get our first application up and running. So we're going to go ahead and create an app.py file and start coding. So from guizero import app, and we're just going to say app equals app like that, and we're going to say app display. So that is the most basic guizero application. If we hit the play button here in VS Code, if we hit the play button right here, that's going to start our application up. And that is a basic guizero application. So additional things that you can do is you can set a title. So let's do that. Just a basic hello world. And if we go ahead and run that, then we get it with a title there. Okay, so beyond that, let's add a little message. So we need to make sure we import the text widget from guizero, and we need to attach it to our app. So that's the first thing that gets passed to any widget with guizero. It's what container are you attaching this to? We're just attaching ours to our app. So that goes in as the first argument. Then you can set the text whatever you want. So something like that. And then just go ahead and hit play again. And there's our text message. Okay, so what's next? That's all fine and good. Let's get this a little bit closer to our goal of making an Autoclicker. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to add a little bit of code here. And the main thing to look at is this app.repeat. So this will basically set up a function that gets called on some interval. So this is in milliseconds, and this is going to be every 10 milliseconds it's going to call our doClick function. So let's go ahead and pull that over. This does need to be before the app display because this is what's called a blocking request. Nothing will run after this line of code until after the window for your application is closed. So it's just going to sit here and wait for the window to close, and then additional code would run. So we need to make sure we put this up above, above that line. So we're going to say doClick. Let's just print out click for now. And let's set up our repeat for our application. We're going to do it every 10 milliseconds. It's going to be super fast, which is what we want for an Autoclicker. And let's go ahead and hit play. And as you can see, our application's running. This click is running super, super fast. And there we go. Okay, so that's all fun and good, but let's get it so we can actually control the mouse and the keyboard now. The library we're going to use for this is the PyInput library. So let's get that installed. Come back over to our terminal. We're going to pip install PyInput. Now that we have that, we're going to do a couple of things here. So the first thing is we're going to import our controller and button from the mouse part of the PyInput library. And then we're going to set up a mouse controller. We're going to set a variable is clicking to false so that it will start off by not being clicked. We're going to modify our do click to actually click. So we're going to check and see if that is clicking as set. If it is set, then we're going to trigger on our mouse controller the click event. And then we're going to click the left button 2 times. So that's basically a double click. And this toggle clicking method will come in handy in a little bit. It'll allow us to turn it on and off. But let's start with that. And one quick note, you'll see that this use of global here, that's just to keep this very short and concise so that we can display it in a very quick amount of time. But don't do that in your real programs. Find a better way to model your data. So switching back to our application code, let's see where we would want to put this. Again, the first thing we want is those imports. So we're going to say from PyInput mouse import controller and button. And then we're basically just going to replace the do click that's just printing click. So let's just go ahead and delete that, and let's set up our mouse controller. And let's set our is clicking flag here to false. And then let's redefine our do click that we erased. And it's just going to be an if statement with is clicking. So if we're clicking, then we want to say mouse click button left. And we'll do 2 clicks. So it'll do a double click every time. And everything else is the same. So we still have this app repeat every 10 milliseconds is going to call the do click. But it's only going to do something if this is set to true. So at this point, if we run our application, it's not going to do anything. So we can go ahead and stop that. And if we were to set this to true, it would start clicking at this point. But we're not going to do that quite yet because it can get a little bit out of control. So we're going to make sure we have a way to turn it off before we just hard code it to be on. Okay, so that leads us to the next feature that we're going to add to our little application here. We're going to, this time from the PyInput keyboard part of the library, we're going to grab this global hotkeys class. And what that is that allows us to register using a string of characters here, what we want the hotkey to be, and then bind it to a method. This is our toggle clicking method that we made last time, which just simply inverts whether is clicking is. If it's true, it turns false. If it's false, it turns true. So we're going to set that up, and then we're going to run start on it. That's going to start a thread that will listen for these hotkeys and call that function anytime it detects them being pressed. So coming back to our code, first thing we need to do is import our class that we need. This time it's from keyboard, and we want the global hotkeys. Now, where we put this is a little bit important. It needs to be after the toggle clicking, which we actually didn't quite add, so let's get that added in as well. So we have this toggle clicking, and it's going to use a global. Again, don't use global in your normal code. We're just doing that to keep this real nice and easy and short. fit hopefully on the screen. That's just going to invert clicking. Okay. I want to get this a little smaller. So our global hotkeys now is a dictionary. So we're going to do the curly braces. And then the key is literally what we want the hotkey to be. So let's do Control, Alt, and the opening square bracket. And then the method we want to call is toggle clicking. So we just need to make sure we define this after this has already been defined. So this line just has to be below toggle clicking. And don't forget that we need to start this. So if we don't start it, it'll just be setting things up, but nothing will be running. We have to make sure we call start, and that will start the thread. This is a non-blocking call. It will start the listener in another thread. And that will allow the rest of this to run. So with that in place, I should be able to start our little application. And if we turn it on with the hotkeys now, so Control, let's see if we can get this thing. We're going to go Control, Alt, and there it goes. The clicking is happening. And if we Control, Alt again, it's now turned off. Great. So we've got an auto clicker at this point. The GUI is kind of not very useful though. It just has a message. So let's take care of that next. So what we're going to do now is we're going to replace our existing toggle clicking with this method here. So it's really just adding a little bit of details where we're going to change some text on a button, and we're going to move the mouse, and that's just so that as soon as we turn it on, it doesn't immediately turn itself off and become one of the most useless desktop applications there is. It's already a contender for that, but that would, without moving the mouse, it will immediately turn itself off. And then the other thing we need to do is actually create that button that we're going to push. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got a little bit more to import, but it's part of the guizero library. So I'm just going to go up here onto the first line and add our push button to the list of things that we're going to import. And let's go ahead and define that button. It's going to need to be below this. We're going to replace that, or we're going to add to that here in a second, but I'm going to just say button equals push button. We're going to attach it to the app again. We're going to set the text equal to start, and then we're going to add this command argument here, and that tells it what function to run whenever the button is activated. So this is going to call our toggle clicking button whenever we click that button. Now to make this a good desktop application, we're going to say button text every time we toggle it is equal to stop. If is clicking, otherwise start. And then like I mentioned, we want to move the mouse. So we're going to say mouse move. It's the X and the Y, so we're going to say 0 in the X and 30 in the Y. That should move it off the button so it doesn't immediately turn itself off. So with that in place, if we go ahead and activate our program again and start it with the shortcut key, I forgot to close it last time. Okay, so we've got it activated with our start button here. If I click on that, the mouse jumps down and it is clicking. And if we turn it, okay, so there's another bug here and we're going to address that in a sec, but it is working and I can do it with keyboard shortcuts. So, okay, we're good. Let's go ahead and shut that down and see what's next. So this is basically what our code looks like at this point. Okay, so that is our application. There are some bugs. There's a lot more we could do, obviously, but hopefully this gives you a good introduction, shows you some of the ways you can integrate the PyInput library into a desktop application. So where do you go next? The guizero docs are a great place to get some more information about different components. There's a whole bunch of widgets that are available. There's a bunch of events and other functions and features of this library that we didn't get into. You can style things, you can arrange things into grids, a whole bunch of awesome things you can do with this, but that's about all that we have time for today. So what should you do next? Well, I believe that programming is problem solving, not just watching video tutorials of other people solving problems. So the way that you develop that skill is by solving problems. Doing things that you're not sure how to do and not sure if you can do is the only way to develop programming ability. So I kind of left some of this unfinished on purpose to give you something to practice with. Here's some ideas of some things that you could do. You could show how many clicks have been fired off by the application, like add another text widget and update that and see if you can get that working. Add more keyboard shortcuts for different functions and features that you might want to have, like say increasing and decreasing the speed or the clicks, the ability to click at random locations, or maybe you have a way to define a bounding box or some coordinates, maybe a checkbox to say if it's random or not. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of things you could do with an autoclicker. This should give you enough of an introduction to get going, and hopefully you're going to practice now and get better at programming, because that's the whole goal. One last pitch here. If you do learn something from this, do take the opportunity to teach someone else about it. It does two things. A, it helps somebody else, but B, it actually reinforces your learning. You're going to learn something 100 times better if you have to teach someone else how to do it. So if you're wanting the quick path of how to accelerate your journey in programming, teach somebody. It's one of the best recommendations that there is. I mean, aside from programming is the most important part. You gotta actually do it. You can't just watch videos. You gotta do it. But the second best thing to do is to teach. So hopefully I've taught you something today. And if you've learned something from this, or if you have any questions or comments or feedback, please let me know.